Good evening. I am back and talking about a book. This is the book I have read. You have seen it in the name of the video. Because it's that time of year and I can't bring myself to bring anything complicated. So I go back and read Doctor Who books. And I wasn't prepared to say goodbye to Matt Smith just yet, as much as I enjoyed Deep Breath the other day. So I decided to pick up one of these off the shelf and we went with this one. So I enjoyed The Crimson Horror. You know, we did the video recently, we talked about it. I think it's a great story, and it's lovely to see Mark Gatiss writing this because it gives us an opportunity, I think, to think about Mark Gatiss a little bit more, because I've had some interesting thoughts about Mark Gatiss recently. Generally, though, I must say, The Crimson Horror is really, really good fun. And to a certain extent, given the new tone of the Target books, or at least the ones I've read so far, and Humphrey clued me in for 73 yards. I feel as if the writers of the new Target books are taking the opportunity to go deeper and explore a bit broadly and experiment a little bit whilst within the Target framework. And Gatiss kind of has his cake and eats it here, in so much as that the second half of this book is a very, very straight telling of the Crimson Horror. In terms of plotting at least, in much of a Terrance Dicks style Target book, as in, we just get what happens in the Crimson Horror. The slight wrinkle in that, though, is that Gatiss plays very fast and loose, and I don't care about this, with the narration. Okay, so we have, it's a conceit, but it falls apart very quickly and you just don't care. And I don't think Gatiss cares. You have him just assembling all these voices. So you get Jenny doing quite a lot of the narration, which I'm really a big fan of, actually, because I think of the three of the Paternoster gang, I think Jenny gets the least time to shine. Not quite true in the last few stories, actually. We get a bit of Strax. We get the character that keeps fainting. We even get a bit of Ada. We even get a bit narrated by the Doctor, which is absolutely joyous because he really captures Matt Smith's voice beautifully well. So the second half of the book, as I say, apart from the style of narration, which any Doctor Who fan, any Target fan will be perfectly comfortable with, I would have thought, is a pretty straight run through the Crimson Horror. The first bit of the book, though, I think is probably the better bit of the book, where Gatiss has the opportunity to write a sort of an origin story of Jenny and the Doctor meeting for the first time. So we get a brand new adventure. I don't want to go into detail because I think you should go and read it because it's lovely, but you get Jenny narrating the first time that she met the Doctor. And it's joyous and it's knowing and it's cheeky. And it's great. It's just absolutely fantastic. So that was a really nice gift, I suppose, a bit of extra content to add into this enjoyment of Crimson Horror. So just to get that out of the way, it's great. I've loved it. It's brilliant. I think you should go read the Crimson Horror. Now, let's talk about the other two things I want to talk about. The first thing is Mark Gatiss himself. So I don't know if I mentioned this the other day, but I was listening to The Rest is Entertainment with Marina Hyde and Richard Osman, a podcast I've become rather obsessed with recently. And Gatiss was referred to as a national treasure. And it took me slightly sideways at the time, but I thought, no, he probably is. But I've always had a peculiar relationship with Gatiss because I think he's always sort of felt like a bit of a... Now, listen, I might sound unkind, but I don't think he's like as good a writer as your RTDs and your Moffats. I don't think he's as good an actor as your Benedict Cumberbatches and your David Tennants, for example. But he seems to be a bit good at everything. And I suppose that is something that sets you up for, national treasure status, doesn't he? Stephen Fry's a bit similar to that. Now, shout me down if you wish, but I'm not too enamoured with Stephen Fry's writing, although I have read a few of his books. I feel whenever I'm watching Stephen Fry acting, I'm watching Stephen Fry acting. But he's just the kind of person you're kind of glad to have around you'd invite him to meet your nan, that kind of thing. And Gatiss kind of falls into that category. And I'm glad that Gatiss is part of Doctor Who. I think it's a really positive thing. And of course, Gatiss, to my mind, I first knew about Gatiss from his work with the League of Gentlemen. a comedy series which I have a tremendous amount of affection for. I think it's absolutely genius. And in fact, it's one of the books, one of the comedy programs talked about in a book that I read recently called Sunshine on Putty, which is a sort of analysis, a history of comedy between 1993 and 2003. It was a decent book. I enjoyed it. But League Gentleman comes towards the end of that. And we were obsessed with League Gentleman. We were at university. But the thing about Gatiss is that I think his stock in trade is nostalgia. And I generally in life, I struggle with nostalgia. I think nostalgia is a powerful force, but I think oftentimes it has, and this is a weird thing for a Doctor Who fan to say, has kind of a negative effect, an impact. And therefore, maybe some of my reservations about Gattis' stories and his writing comes down to that. Because in this book, okay, let's reverse that. This book is chock full of nostalgia. It's got nostalgia for stuff that hasn't even happened. And yet that's fine, because it's a target book. Gattis knows that he's writing a target book. So like I said, he's having his cake and eating it. He's doing a very straight, in one extent, target book. But at the same time, he's playing with stuff. He invents a brand new set of baddies called the Cabal, which is just like there for no discernible reason. He has a footnote to a Doctor Who book that doesn't exist yet. He has odd references to other stories. Talons Wayne Chine crops up. There's a couple of moments of dialogue. I thought, have you just lifted that almost verbatim from Talons of Wayne Chine, just so we know, we're all on the same page here. There's all sorts of bits and bats like that. And yet, in the context of this story, I'm perfectly cool with that. Hello, my dog. I'm perfectly cool with that, because it's that sort of story, isn't it? Too much Gattis, I think, gets a bit mawkish and a bit moreish. And when Gattis doesn't quite sing, I just think you're left with that sort of a bit of a hollowness there. Again, I'm not slagging him off, quite the opposite. I'm glad he's part of our gang, if you like. But I think you need to use him a bit sparingly. And yet this, where he's able to bring all that joy of Doctor Who, that knowledge of Doctor Who, the knowledge of target books as well. I think that's a really important part of that. His sort of immersion in these characters, it's just a really lovely experience. So there we go. That's a fairly nuanced take on Gattis, I hope. But I do feel that the longer you spend in Gattis' company, I think the more he suckers you in, up until the point where you think, probably need to go and listen to some hip-hop now. Do you know what I'm saying? I need to go and engage in 21st century culture a bit, and we'll leave the conversation about Sherlock Holmes for another day. But I do want those conversations. There we go. So there we go. Last thing I want to say. This is probably our goodbye. Is it to Strax and Vastra and Jenny? I think it might be. So it's another opportune time to do this, because I didn't really touch upon that in Deep Breath, I don't think. But what a team. So I've been trying to work out where they sit in the sort of pantheon of Doctor Who, because you get the Doctor and you get the Companion, and then you get Unit, don't you? You get the Brigadier and the crew. And they're not quite companions, but they're certainly not just incidental characters. They're super important, particularly the Brigadier. And you sort of go through, and that's the Brigadier's the sort of template for that sort of character, isn't it? So who else has challenged in that way? Well, Jack, to a certain extent. But there wasn't really a team around Jack. There was Torchwood, but they didn't really feature in Doctor Who particularly. And their immersion in Doctor Who is a little bit muddied anyway by the fact that they were essentially the baddie at one point, but that's fine. So then, I think, tell me if I'm wrong here, are Strax and Vastra and Jenny the closest that we've come to another unit team up until we get the other unit team? Do you know what I'm saying? I think they probably are. Hello, Dusty. And I think that's good to a certain extent, in so much as I think they're absolutely beautiful. I think they're such wonderful characters. I think they're so interesting, and they're so, I don't want to say progressive, it sounds too clinical, but they're just sort of, they casually allow you to be funny and explore themes and and to do the brilliant thing that Doctor Who does, where you put things in the wrong place and see what happens, you know, Vastra and Strax most obviously. And I just think they're an absolute triumph, quite frankly. I'd have happily taken story after story with those three. I think that you could do that in Victorian London. I equally think you could concoct a way to have them anywhere you want, quite frankly. But I just think they're such a crew, and they're so funny, and I care about them, and I care about their relationships. I just think they're absolutely lovely. So there we go. It was a really nice, opportune moment to read this because, like I say, farewell to Matt Smith, we've done all that. But if this is, and I'm pretty sure it is, farewell to Strax and Vastra and Jenny, and after mentioning it so many times, if it's not, I'm going to look right Pratt, aren't I, in a few weeks' time, then, okay, that'll do. That's fine. All right, then. That'll be all right. Okay, then. And I'm desperately thinking what the season... No, it's fine. They're not. It's 21st century. Okay, so yes, highly recommended. Really, really love it. It's a Target book. My gosh. They're too expensive still, but there we go. You can find them somewhere and get them cheap because they're bracing.